was one of the most prolific and terrifying killers in Mexico's history. Today, we're going to delve into the story of Santiago Meza Lopez, also known as El Pozolero, a man responsible for dissolving over 500 human bodies in caustic soda and water. Join us as we uncover the chilling details of El Pozolero's life, from his beginnings in the Tijuana cartel to his gruesome reign of terror as a member of one of Mexico's most notorious drug cartels. Learn about the shocking methods he used to dispose of his victims, and how he finally met his downfall at the hands of law enforcement. Stay tuned for a story that is both haunting and unforgettable. This is not for the faint of heart, but it's important to understand the brutal violence that has plagued Mexico for decades. Stick around till the end of the video to learn more about this shocking tale. Law enforcement officials raided Santiago's concealed location, where he was stirring a spicy mixture. When questioned about it, he claimed it was seafood soup. Santiago was known for his cooking skills and was even referred to as El Pozolero. Pozole, a popular Mexican stew made with pork, hominy, vegetables, and spices, was his specialty. Santiago once said that he chose his job to ensure his family did not go hungry. Santiago spent years stripping thousands of bodies, submerging them in a drum filled with water and caustic soda, and heating the drum using a gas burner to dissolve the bodies overnight. Afterward, he typically disposed of the remains, such as teeth, nails, and bone fragments, by burning them with gasoline and burying them. Santiago Meza Lopez, also known as El Pozolero, was born in the small town of San Luis Rio Colorado in the Mexican state of Sonora in 1968. He grew up in a poverty-stricken household, and as a result, he didn't receive much formal education. Instead, he turned to manual labor to help support his family. When he was a young man, El Pozolero became involved in the drug trade. He started off as a small-time dealer, selling marijuana and cocaine on the streets of San Luis Rio Colorado. However, he quickly realized that the real money was in working for one of Mexico's powerful drug cartels. In the mid-1990s, El Pozolero became associated with the Arellano Felix organization, AFO, one of Mexico's most notorious drug cartels. The AFO was led by the brothers, Benjamin Ramon and Francisco Javier Arellano Felix, who had gained a reputation for their brutal tactics and willingness to eliminate anyone who crossed them. El Pozolero quickly rose through the ranks of the AFO. He was known as a sicario, or hitman, and was responsible for carrying out the cartel's dirty work. This included kidnapping, torture, and murder. But El Pozolero's most gruesome task was yet to come. In the early 2000s, the AFO was engaged in a brutal turf war with a rival drug cartel, the Sinaloa Cartel. The violence reached a new level of barbarity when the AFO began to dissolve the bodies of their victims in vats of lye, a caustic substance used to make pozole, a traditional Mexican stew. El Pozolero was the man responsible for carrying out this macabre task. He would take the bodies of the AFO's victims and dissolve them in acid-filled drums, leaving behind nothing but bones and teeth. It is estimated that he dissolved the remains of around 500 people, including members of rival drug cartels, police officers, and innocent civilians. Despite the horrifying nature of his actions, El Pozolero showed no regret. In fact, he boasted about his work, claiming that he was doing a service to society by eliminating the AFO's enemies. He gained infamy for his gruesome actions of dissolving those human bodies in a mixture of caustic soda and water, which resulted in his inclusion on the FBI's list of the 20 most wanted criminals. The Mexican government and international authorities were aware of El Pozolero's gruesome activities, but it took years for them to catch up with him. On January 14, 2009, Mexican authorities, aided by the FBI, finally arrested El Pozolero in Tijuana, Mexico. The manhunt had been ongoing for months, with law enforcement officials tracking him across the country. El Pozolero had been on the run since the discovery of the first narco fossa, but he had continued to work for the AFO, carrying out their orders and carrying out his gruesome trade. However, the authorities were determined to bring him to justice, and they launched a massive operation to track him down. The arrest of El Pozolero was a major victory for law enforcement officials in Mexico and the United States. He was charged with multiple counts of murder and drug trafficking. According to Santiago Meza Lopez himself, his descent into a life of crime began when he learned that his sister had been raped by members of a criminal organization operating in the area. In order to seek revenge, he joined the Tijuana cartel through Teodora Garcia Cimental, also known as El Teo. The Tijuana cartel was led by the notorious Arellano Felix brothers, and Meza Lopez's initial goal was to assassinate the rapists. However, he eventually became a full-fledged member of the cartel and was tasked with carrying out gruesome acts such as dissolving his enemies with acid or caustic soda. During his trial, El Pozolero expressed regret for his actions. He claimed that he was only following orders from the AFO leadership, and that he had no choice but to carry out their orders. But this defense was not enough to absolve him of his crimes. While he tried to shift the blame for his brutal attempts, he was eventually convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He's currently serving his sentence in a high-security prison in Mexico. According to reports, he admitted to making $600 per week by submerging cadavers in a tub filled with acid and sodium hydroxide, constantly stirring the bodies for 8 hours until everything except the teeth, nails, and some bone fragments dissolved. Any remnants were burned before being buried on an empty lot of his property, as per Meza's family members. They claim that Meza chose this line of work to prevent his children from starving to death. Subsequently, investigators discovered approximately 14,000 to 15,000 remains buried on Meza's farm after his arrest. The case of Santiago Meza Lopez, aka El Pozolero, is a stark reminder of the brutal violence that has plagued Mexico for decades. The country's drug war has left a trail of death and destruction, with cartels battling for control of the lucrative drug trade. The Mexican government has struggled to keep up with the violence, and the country has seen a surge in homicides in recent years. But it's also a reminder that justice can be served. El Pozolero may have believed that he was above the law, but in the end, he was held accountable for his crimes. His arrest and conviction were a small victory in the larger battle against organized crime in Mexico. It also sends a message that no one is above the law, no matter how powerful or ruthless they may be. The case of El Pozolero also sheds light on the psychological toll that the drug war has had on those involved. El Pozolero claimed that he was just following orders, but it's clear that he was deeply affected by the violence and brutality of his actions. His attempt to justify his actions by claiming that he was doing a service to society speaks to the distorted thinking that can result from prolonged exposure to violence and trauma. While he did horrific crimes, some people in Mexico expressed sympathy for El Pozolero. There are those who see him as a victim of circumstance, someone who is caught up in the violence of the drug war and forced to do the bidding of the AFO. However, it's important to remember that El Pozolero was not an innocent victim. He was a willing participant in the AFO's reign of terror, and he carried out some of the most brutal acts of violence in the cartel's history. He may have been a product of his environment, but he was also responsible for his own actions. The case of Santiago Meza Lopez, aka El Pozolero, is a dark chapter in the history of the Mexican drug war, but it's also a reminder of the bravery and dedication of the law enforcement officials who worked to bring him to justice. Their tireless efforts are a testament to the resilience and strength of the Mexican people in the face of devastating violence and adversity. As the country continues to grapple with the legacy of the drug war, it's important to remember the victims and to work towards a future where violence and corruption are no longer the norms. The case of El Pozolero may be a disturbing and gruesome example of the worst of humanity, but it also serves as a call to action to build a better future for Mexico and its people.